and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. You know the score by now. All things Eagles related wrapped up, put into a nice box of hay fever tablets and distributed to you all free of charge because we are all sniffling together. The sun is shining, apparently just as it is here in England, and I am a hay fevery mess. My eyes are puffy, I can't stop sneezing, I'm not even allowed the fan on in my room because it whirs and it makes a weird interference with the microphone, so I'm sweating, it's boiling, and I can't stop sneezing. So, as you can see, I'm thriving right now, and if that's not enough to be inspired and subscribe and leave a lovely review to this podcast, then I'm all out. You can do so on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, the Google Play Store, and your WCW's car. Just imagine you're passing her on the freeway, you look over, and you just hear this nice rhythmic sound. You know she's blasting some fire on the aux cable, and then you realise it's the questions to this week's Eagles blockbusters, because she stands winning free t-shirts, just like you should. So here is what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's the heart of the off-season, content may be dying down, but not on this podcast. We are still rolling out free t-shirts like we're in a strip club, just making it rain, which I've only just realised is where that happens. I thought that was just what happened if you're rich and you couldn't store your money in a bank, so you had to throw it everywhere. Apparently, you learn something new every day. Every day is a school day. But back onto topic. Eagles blockbusters. We do have a winner this week. If you're new to this podcast, what I recommend doing is hitting that subscribe button, because every single week we give you the chance to win a free Philly Sports Network t-shirt. All you have to do is answer 3 clues correctly. The 3 clues themselves are pointing towards players on the Eagles roster currently. Get them all right, email them to phillysportsnetwork@gmail.com or DM me on Twitter and you'll get yourself a free t-shirt. What can be better than going out in the summer with a nice pair of sunglasses on and a bright pink Philly Sports? Now, I can't think of much better. So without further ado, here are the answers to last week's questions. If you didn't get them, I know a lot of you sent them in. We had a few correct ones. We do have a winner, as I said. So here are the answers. Clue number 1 was, I've lost my dog. Can you help me find it? I've lost my dog. Can you help me find it? The answer to that was Rasul Douglas. Douglas. I know, it's bad, alright? We've done the easy ones now. We're having to really dig deep. So, Rasul, Douglas, it'll do. The second one was an Atomic Kitten song, which you had to fill in the blank. And I don't want to have to sing for you again, but I guess I kind of have to. So the clue was, looking back on where we first met, I could not escape and I cannot forget. Jim Schwartz, you're the one. You still turn me on because you signed Tim Jernigan. Get hard again, Tim Jernigan. It was as close as we could get. A few of the players fitted. Someone messaged me saying that so many of them did. But at the same time, Colton Agadosi didn't, and neither did Godwinny Gugukabukabuki. So beggars can't be choosers. On to the third question, and that was simply, this was a great song by Aqua. And the song I was talking about was Dr. Jones. It's Sidney Jones. That was as good as it gets. And the winner, after spinning the random wheel of greatness, was Christopher Fecker. Or Fetcher. I'm sorry if I've said that wrong. Blame my allergies. If you could email me or get in contact with me via Twitter with your address, your chosen size and colour, I'll get a shirt sent out to you. The other ones from the last couple of weeks are on their way. So sorry for the hold up there. I promise you they are being sent out. But that brings us to how you, listen, right, you, whether you're on a train, a plane, a car, or a sunbed in Spain. Oh, we're rhyming, we're hitting the ground running today. You know the clues are gonna suck. This is how you can win a Philly Sports Network t-shirt. These are your clues for this week's Eagles blockbusters. This Detroit Pistons player had to formally bow to his new coach upon arrival. This Detroit Pistons player had to formally bow to his new coach upon arrival. Now, who's that and what's he doing? You've got to figure it out. It's cryptic. Get the answer to me, phillysportsnetwork@gmail.com. Number 2, Jack Bauer's son went on holiday to a French city. Jack Bauer's son went on holiday to a French city. And clue number 3, oi, get out of my larder. That's my bloody larder, alright? We'll go through them again. We'll mention them at the end as well. So if you can't write them down or make a note, don't panic. You've got a pause button and all of that good stuff. This Detroit Pistons player had to formally bow to his new coach upon arrival. Yeah, maybe it was the Queen. Question 2. Jack Bauer's son went on holiday to a French city. And number 3. Oi, get out of my larder. That's bloody my larder. Get out of it. If you think you've got what it takes to answer all 3 questions correctly, send them my way. phillysportsnetwork@gmail.com or DM me at Liam Jenkins PSN on Twitter. I'll spin the random wheel of greatness and we will crown another winner of Eagles Blockbusters. Congratulations to everyone who got it right. Commiserations to those who didn't. We now have to get into the podcast. And I want to start off with a classic Liam analogy. And that is, for once, has actually nothing to do with my love life, which I'm sure many of you will be relieved to know. But it does start off with Instagram, and you'll see how it directly links to what I'm talking about shortly. But I think that platform overall is pretty toxic, especially for my age demographic, which, believe it or not, is not, 14 years old, which is how I sound. I'm 24, right? So most people my age, it's weird. Like, you see people on social media these days try to almost portray a life that they don't really live. It's kind of like what everyone wants them to see, not what they actually are. So it's all the flashiness. It's the people promoting like the nights out or the holidays. Dubai is always a classic. Like, I don't know many people in my town that haven't gone to Dubai and taken a picture in a swimming pool with some caption about golden hour recently. And I don't know if that's the same in America, but over here, both guys and girls, it's exactly the same. Guys are probably worse, but I think it is quite toxic to a lot of other people. Right, so someone like me, who, while I do have a 38-inch vertical, my body is not chiselled by the Greek gods, believe it or not. I'll see a nice six-pack having bloke in Dubai flexing his muscles, saying about how amazing his life is, and I'll think, I'm still living at home in a little bedroom with a little bit of a beer belly and I don't know what's going on. And it makes you feel a little bit down on yourself, and I can only imagine the pressures that puts on females especially. Not the six-pack guy, but I think Instagram girls are a whole different conversation. But it's interesting that you'd be surprised how many of those people, when portraying that those amazing glamorous lifestyles, as if they're almost a B-Tech celebrity and that they're just by default running around, and you'd almost have to believe they're running around with Justin Bieber for the type of stuff they're putting on. But then away from Instagram, their day-to-day life, because they'll upload that same library from Dubai, it's one string of photos, but one a day for 6 months until they go again. They don't put on the behind-the-scenes stuff and the fact that their relationship's probably in turmoil. Or I know one girl literally from my hometown that, after being with a guy for 3 years, both cheated on each other, and then within a week she was with someone else, and they went to Dubai. It was incredible. I was like, what's gone on there? What a model for consistency that is. It's like, boyfriend application list, will he go to Dubai? Will he take flawless angles? Is he going to cheat on me? Don't know. And I found that fascinating. And it brings me very interestingly, believe it or not, here where I'm going with this, to the whole top 25 under 25 discussion. Now, I first got wind of this. I say like I wasn't alien to the concept before, but I was listening to the Go Birds podcast the other day. Good listen if you're an Eagles fan and don't listen to it already. Friend of the podcast, Elliot Shaw Parks, is on it. Saying that essentially there was an article on Sports Illustrated stating their top 25 players under 25 years old for the 2019 season, none of which were Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, makes kind of sense, right? You think, alright, it's one outlaw, what's the worst that could happen? So I decided to dig a bit deeper. Pro Football Focus, which is strictly about the numbers, as we all know. All 25 and under team? No Eagles players on there. And then obviously NFL.com, you'd assume that a website that balance would have maybe a player from each team. No one there. No one there from the Eagles. And that started on that podcast, the debate of, do the Eagles actually have any exceptional young talent, and why isn't that? Are they drafting badly? You've got Avonte Maddox and Goddard, like where do they filter into all this? And it's fair enough. I would look at it a different way. The Eagles just have a more complete picture because they're not constantly flexing on Instagram. All the other teams, like, for instance, the New York Jets, okay, have Jamal Adams, easily one of the best players of his position, top 25, under 25, without a shadow of a doubt. But if you take away Jamal Adams and recently signed Le'Veon Bell, who have they got at wide receiver outside of Robbie Anderson? Who have they got at tight end outside of, I think, Trevon Wesco they drafted this year? The offensive line isn't brilliant. Their defensive line is very old now. Outside, obviously, Quinn and Williams, they drafted, but shush, alright, I'm making a point. Linebacker, it's the same thing. You go to the Chargers, and obviously, Derwin James, one of the most incredible standouts last year at safety. I know we're sticking on safeties here. Very much a Malcolm Jenkins, play everywhere sort of guy, but for as strong as that Chargers roster was, especially on defense, on offense, again, like, it's a lot of weight on Phillip Rivers, and there are certain arguments you can have about getting older in the wrong places. The Browns are one of the youngest, most hungriest, most competitive rosters in football. But are there areas are weak on that team? Look at the Buffalo Bills. Tre'Davious White, who famously now is just making me look silly for doubting him coming out of college. What about their team as a whole? What about their running back position? What about defense, linebackers? It's just very interesting. Like, the more you dig into it, like Deion Jones, the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, Leighton Van Der Esch and the Dallas Cowboys, outside of arguably Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, I think, is just over that barrier at 26, I believe. That's not a playoff team. So would you rather have the shiny, amazing, the highlight, the stars, the retweet on social media guy, the catch an amazing looking touchdown guy, or do you want a team that's going to go to the Super Bowl, or at least be very close to it on paper? Because the Eagles don't build for young stars. They don't draft young elite stars immediately. They have the conveyor belt built, and we've said this over and over and over again. That they're not building, they're not going into a first round of a draft needing an immediate starter at a position. That's not what this team does. Even at safety, you can argue that if they go into the season with Jenkins, McLeod and Sunday, they'll be alright. It's not the end of the world. Linebacker, you can argue it's fine. They signed Timmy Jernigan on the eve of the draft, so you've now got Cox, Jernigan, Malik. That's fine. That's a good starting trio. The Eagles' method for building this team is very simple. A, sign a cornerstone player. We're talking a Fletcher Cox, a Malcolm Jenkins, a Zach Ertz, Lane Johnson, Alshon Jeffery. One of those guys on a big 5-year extension. Step 2, all of the players where maybe you can't afford those cornerstones across the board. You bring in the free agents, the prove-it guys, the 28-year-olds, normally between 27 and 29, off of maybe an injury-plagued season, or a year that was unproductive, or a year off a moved team and a change of scheme proved to be detrimental to their career, circa Patrick Robinson. And you bring them in. Someone like LeGarrette Blount, someone like Patrick Robinson. You've got a million names you can list last year. Golden Tate would be a good example, but let's not go into that trade acquisition at the moment. That's not a good idea. 2019, Zach Brown jumps off the page as an immediate replacement for Jordan Hicks. It's what this team does. Andrew Sendejo's another one. Stefan Wisniewski technically comes back as a free agent on a cheaper deal. Same with Timmy Jernigan. And then you've got the guys who are drafted. The Derek Barnetts. The guys like Andre Dillard. The guys like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. When you look across the board, you can follow this pattern throughout, whether it's a Wendell Smallwood, whether it's a Shelton Gibson. But since the start of this era, young players come in and they learn under veterans. And Jason Peters is doing it with Dillard now. He did it with Mailata last year. He's done it with Vaitai as this incredible mentor. Arcega-Whiteside under Jeffrey. Another key partnership. You're going to have Jordan Howard. You're going to have Miles Sanders. Then you've got a very important backfield battle. But no matter who's drafted, no one has been drafted with the expectation outside of Carson. Even Carson Wentz wasn't drafted with the expectation to start. Let's not forget, he was meant to sit out his rookie season behind Sam Bradford until a shock trade changed everything. Sam Bradford changed everything. And all of a sudden, Wentz was your perennial starter. But it's the same pattern. Derek Barnett has grown into a starter. Just as J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, just as Miles Sanders, just as Andre Dillard. All of those guys will grow into starters. And if they don't, if Wendell Smallwood doesn't, if Blake Countess from that original class in 2016 didn't, if Jalen Mills didn't, it's not the end of the world. They just repeat, they rinse and repeat the same process. You're not mortgaging your franchise on the fate of a first round pick. You're not going up and trading aggressively for a guy that has to perform like a starter in his rookie season for your team to contend. You don't ignore those free agency needs. So yeah, you're going to have teams like Cleveland. I would argue Kansas City could be argued as another one. Teams where they're full of young stars, 24, 25-year-olds, the highlight makers, the guys who are going to end up on SportsCenter, who everyone wants to be cool. They want the Baker Mayfield jersey. They want to get that Odell Beckham jersey, you know? And then you've got the under-the-radar guys. And the Eagles are just simply that. Instead of being the Instagram girl in Dubai, the Eagle is the girl at home making her own business. Making a clothing line. Selling arts and crafts, whatever it may be. They're hustling. They're going under the radar. They're not trying to portray themselves anything they're not. And it's a more complete picture because when you strip all of that facade away, you're all bare bums when you go in the shower. It's all the same people. Just on one hand, it's all very materialistic, very fake, very flash in the pan. And the next minute, you've got a long, sustainable growth, long, sustainable life. Someone that's maybe just bought their first flat, but just doesn't post it all on social media. And that's what I think this Eagles team is. So don't worry about the fact that this team doesn't have 9 players listed in 25 under 25, because if you're going to go 25 over 25, I'd argue that they probably have most of their team in it. But just because they don't have players in that list doesn't mean they don't have talent. If we ignore this draft class alone, right? Josh Sweat, for instance, is a wild unknown. Could easily break out next year. He's 22. Derek Barnett, now entering his 3rd year in the NFL, is 23. 23 years old. Rasul Douglas, 3rd year in the NFL, 23. Sidney Jones, 2nd year in the NFL, completed, 23. Avonte Maddox. Well, I think the least I know him, the better. We all know just how special Avonte Maddox could be. The further you go, that the names just keep on coming and coming. Dallas Goedert, another one from that last class. Jordan Howard, only 24. Has been an incredibly efficient back throughout his young career. An incredibly durable one. Hassan Ridgeway could be a sleeper. Not saying he's going to be the top, under 25 list, but certainly a key player in years to come. Ronald Darby, just 25. Kamu Grugier-Hill, 25. It just doesn't stop. Isaac Seumalo, 25. Nate Sudfeld, Trey Sullivan. Nelson Aguilar just misses it at 26. But that's a strong group of young guys. None of them are going to be those elite Odell Beckham level conversation players, the Saquon Barkley level players, the Tre'Davious White level players, the Jamal Adams level players. But the problem is with those stars is that they become the centre point of the team. If you take Jamal Adams away from the Jets, it doesn't look that great. At least not for now. I mean, they had a good offseason, a very good offseason, and with Joe Douglas at the helm, maybe things will turn around pretty soon. But if you look at numerous teams across the NFL, the New York Giants, they've got Saquon Barkley. Who else now? Who else have they got? That's my point. That is the definition of the Instagram guy in Dubai. The Eagles are just a low-key guy, doesn't really pay much attention to social media, doesn't care about the clout, does his own thing, runs his own business, becomes a millionaire overnight. That's the difference. One more, Instagram's there today, gone tomorrow. What you do outside of that. See, I'm teaching you life lessons now. You don't get this in other bloody podcasts, do you? I'm a teacher. What can I say? It was a failed career path. But if you're enjoying this podcast, guys, make sure you leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and, well, if you're on YouTube anyway. If you could, though, if you are listening on YouTube, I'm talking to you right now on the YouTube page. Go to iTunes, leave a 5-star review. Actually write a review. That will be phenomenal. That's the best way to show your support for this podcast. But now we're going to get to my absolute favourite part of the show. You know what it is. I know what it is. But do you know what it is? Of course, I'm referring to Thank You Next. It's a part of the show where I take your questions from social media and answer them on the show. And we're going to kick things off with a question from the Pod Street Bullies, Philly Sports Network's very own Flyers podcast, which is doing amazing things. And I promise I won't drop a soppy speech, which is just as well, because they say, hey, boss man, PSB here. I want to know if the Eagles are going to beat those stinking Cowboys ever again. Last year was tough, but I'm seriously questioning whether the Eagles will ever beat the Cowboys ever again. Derek is a Cowboys fan, in case you hadn't guessed, and the answer is yes, Derek. I think they will. I don't know what it is, but I've just got an inkling which they will at some point. Probably next year. Twice. There's a statement. Thank you. Next to Justin Ladola says, how do you feel Sanders compares to next year's running back class? That's a good question. I'm going to be honest, I haven't paid that much attention to next year's draft class just yet. I'm trying to still decompress from the last few months of draft stuff, but there are a few backs that I like. I know it's going to be a relatively strong running back class. There's another guy coming out of Ohio State. I think it's Dobbins. Could be a second round pick, so that's the sort of guy that I would compare to Miles Sanders if we're looking at that sort of window. Kylan Hill is a guy that I'm really high on already out of Mississippi State. Was watching some highlights on him yesterday, so again, not really paid too much attention into next year's class just yet, but I know that a lot of the bigger schools, I think obviously the headline of the guy is DeAndre Swift. There are big names coming out, so this could be the next franchise running back guy, but not for the Eagles because they've got Miles Sanders, and that clearly seems to be where they're at right now. But it is interesting though. Thank you. Next, Geordie Fighter 14 says, what do you think the Eagles' record will be, and would you ever think of having fans of the podcast in the podcast? Eagles' record next year, it's tricky, but either 12-4 or 13-3 I think is a very realistic estimation. That's not exactly overhyping anything, and it also allows for a few bogey losses as well. The Eagles should have an easier schedule in comparison to last year's, but time will tell. It's a long season. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of shocking losses in the odd article that comes out of, oh my god, it's all falling apart, I don't know what to do. Maybe a panic podcast as well, who knows, but over 10 wins certainly, verging on 12-13, I think it's not exactly shocking to predict that. Would I have fans on the podcast? I'd like to have a call-in section. My worry is either doing it as co-hosts or as a call-in, or how do I facilitate it, because obviously time difference wise and finding the right time and everyone's different, so I don't know. It's something that I definitely want to toy with moving forward. There's some stuff we've got in the pipeline that is very, I would say, fan interaction heavy, so that'll be stuff to look out for. But yeah, absolutely, man, you guys are the core of what we do, so of course we want to get you involved. And finally, Will Roberts says, who is the best receiver in the NFC? Oh, that's a bit cheeky, that, isn't it? I mean, that's a really, really hard conversation. I feel it's very subjective. It doesn't matter what stats you look at. Something like that is always going to be subjective. And the minute you're not discussing Julio Jones in that conversation is the minute you may not have taken your hay fever tablets, sneezed too hard, and then ended up giving yourself a concussion. So it's hard not to say Julio Jones. It's just true. Outside of that, Brandon Cooks is obviously a good shout, but more importantly for me, I think Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs. Like, I love Adam Thielen's game. The guy's an absolute machine. You just can't really stop him. Like, there's nothing you can do. Then you get to New Orleans, and there's Michael Thomas, and you're going to have Mike Evans from Tampa Bay, you're going to have DJ Moore, not quite in that conversation, but certainly could be. That's literally just the NFC South. So Amari Cooper's got to come into it at some point, I suppose, as well. But for now, we're just going to play it safe and going to put all our shit on Julio Jones, because I just think he's unmatched. I really do. The only guy, in my opinion, that comes close is DeAndre Hopkins, and that's in the AFC, so we can't really go there. But yeah, that's who I would go with, just off the bat. But if you want to submit your questions for the next edition of Thank You Next, and you can do so by tweeting me at Liam Jenkins PSN. That's at Liam Jenkins PSN. Not 21, that one got suspended, but we're not bitter about it, and we certainly don't mention it every show. But now we've hit the second topic of the show, and normally there are 3 or 4, but because it's the off season and it's that long month, we've got to condense it down. So these are little bite-sized versions almost of the Outside Insider, but it wouldn't be an episode without a tragic Liam love life analogy, and this one goes way back deep. This is 14-year-old emo Liam listening to My Chemical Romance. Alright, so basically we're going to kick things off with a tale. And little emo Liam had a crush on this girl that he gradually became best friends with and friend zone with. You know the story, we've all been there. And I went round her house once. I had a little cuddle, met her parents, who smoked a lot. Like, their house stank of smoke. But that's a different discussion. She was all upset about this guy. And I was, oh, don't worry, like, selling myself. Like, I'm gonna win her heart. Everything's gonna be okay. And she had a Rubik's Cube on the side. And I thought, oh, I'd recognise those blocks anywhere. And I pointed out, have you ever solved it? And she went, no, I could never do it. It always really annoyed me that my mum bought it for Christmas and I could never solve the Rubik's Cube. So off Liam went. And he bought a Rubik's Cube. And he spent the next month trying to learn how to do said Rubik's Cube. Alright, I didn't have many friends at school. We've established this, okay? And it got so obsessive that I then went out and bought a speed cube. If you don't know what a speed cube is, this is going to blow your mind. So a speed cube is basically a Rubik's Cube, but it's a lot smoother, so you can take it apart a lot easier, and all the pieces sort of glide. So if you try and do 2 moves at once, I can't believe I'm even justifying this. I can't believe I'm 24 years old justifying Rubik's Cube solving. But if you try and do 2 moves at once on a regular Rubik's Cube, it locks up. And if you're trying to go for a sub 30-second solve, you're out. You can't do it. So I used to take the original Rubik's Cube apart, put Vaseline into it, put it back together, move it around a lot, and then you've got a smoother cube. But I ended up buying a speed cube, and then eventually did it, and I was like, right, okay, what about if I solve it in under 30 seconds, you give me a kiss? And it worked, and I got a kiss, and it was the best moment of my life, almost. And then about a month later, this new guy comes up who can ride a motorbike, okay, and he just does speedway. He doesn't do speedway at all now. I think he works in a garage. But he rode a motorbike around a bit and was... I'm not being a personal, attacking person. I'm a nice man. But he was he was horrible. He wasn't a nice man at all. He was a bit of a bully. And she liked him and they went out, and that upset me a lot because Rubik's Cube took a lot of effort. Which Eagles player am I referring to about that? I'm talking about Alshon Jeffery. Now, Alshon Jeffery didn't try to solve a Rubik's Cube. Alshon Jeffery did not lose out to a man riding a motorbike. But there is a young man out of Stanford, wide receiver, built in a very peculiarly similar vein to him. And I think there is a tremendous amount of pressure on Alshon Jeffery that no one is talking about. And I don't mean that he's going to suddenly not make the roster or get cut from the roster or anything to that extreme, but for his own sustainability within the Eagles locker room, for his own sustainability on the Eagles roster moving forward for the next 2 years, because he's got 3 years left contracted, and that's fine. That's great. But we have to remember one thing here, and that is that it's not been the smoothest ride. Alshon Jeffery's contract in 2019 is costing the Eagles $14.7 million in cap space. He is the highest paid player, as things stand going into this season alone, on that roster, the highest paid player on the team, Alshon Jeffery. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's what they paid him to be. They needed a number 1 receiver. They got a number 1 receiver. His base salary, for context, I mean, even against Carson Wentz, he earns 11.7 mil base salary. Brandon Brooks is next with 8. Then it's Cox, who had his all moved around, obviously. And out of there, Malcolm Jenkins at 8, Nelson Aguilar, and then Carson Wentz is all the way down there on his final year with a base salary. So it's not very indicative, but the point is, next year that goes up another $1 million, then it's 15 mil. And it's 15 mil for the next 2 years. Now that's fine. But Alshon Jeffery's impact as a number 1 receiver has rarely been statistical. It's always been what it does to a defense, the attention it draws to him, and how it opens things up for Carson Wentz, how it gives him that trust to throw those 50-50 balls. And nothing was ever really confirmed. Nothing was ever cemented as being genuine, but there were certainly murmurs in both of the last 2 years with Alshon Jeffery being a little bit unhappy with the target share. A little bit upset maybe with the fact that Zach Ertz was receiving ball after ball after ball, while Alshon was sat in 2018 in 13 games recording 92 targets, which is his lowest since his rookie year in 2012, where he had 48 because he played in 6 games, or 10 games and started 6. Now, his production has never really been that off course. I mean, he's had at least 800 yards in 3 of the last 4 years, 789 in 2017. And it's certainly not like he's not scoring touchdowns. He's had 15 in the last 2 years. But in terms of actual receptions and yards per game and all of those other metrics, he's not been that Odell Beckham guy, that Jarvis Landry guy, that the sole guy in the offense, the team's number one receiving option, because it's been a selfless mentality. And that's fine. That is absolutely fine, because when he was first brought in, he changed the way the offense worked. He changed the way that progressions worked, the route trees you could run, a massive, massive upgrade over to what they had in 2016. But now we enter a time frame where you've got Nelson Aguilar in the middle, Deshaun Jackson outside opposite, and JJ Arcega-Whiteside underneath, with 2 elite receiving tight ends. Now, my argument isn't Alshon Jeffery is going to get canned or isn't deserving of the money. My point is, can the Eagles really justify that much money on a receiver when you're going to have Zach Ertz dominating snap counts or receiving counts largely? Deshaun Jackson, who is already going to be a favourite target for Carson Wentz. Dallas Goedert is going to be used in the red zone. Same with Arcega-Whiteside. Then you've got the running backs. Then you've got Nelson Aguilar. And if people do view Arcega-Whiteside as a future heir to the throne, is it really that far-fetched to imagine him taking on that role a little bit sooner rather than later? The Eagles watched Alshon Jeffery solve that Rubik's Cube. They watched him solve the offensive puzzle. See? Metaphor. Right? You see? It was metaphor. This whole thing. Metaphorical. He solved the offensive puzzle. He gave the Eagles the number one option, manipulated defenses, drew the number one corner away from the equation, and opened up the middle of the field for Zach Ertz to set record-setting numbers. But now, with 2 years left on that deal, I was going to cost the Eagles close to $30 million. The question becomes, can they justify that much money? Will Alshon Jeffery take a pay cut? Would trading him make more sense? Would someone take on that money? If, for instance, and let me just set this as a hypothetical, because I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy or someone that is just making things up for attention, because I'm certainly not. It's just hypothetical, and this is what the strain of an off-season does, I suppose. But if we assume that going off averages, Alshon Jeffery puts up another 800 yards, 7 touchdowns. Alright? Catches maybe 60% of balls thrown his way. And Arcega-Whiteside puts up 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. If you know you have the same type of player in Arcega-Whiteside, who is younger, who is cheaper, who is going to eventually develop into a number one guy, if all goes to plan, would it not make more sense for a team constantly battling against the cap to part ways with Alshon Jeffery? Or to maybe look at trading him? Or maybe look at a restructure? The problem with adding a restructure in is it wipes away that money, or it moves it around and makes it longer, and he's got to stay longer to get it. And if he's already unhappy, it's a big if, because again, none of this was confirmed, if he was at any point a little bit unhappy with the snap counts, with the receiving numbers, with the targets, whatever it may be, then stripping the pay away, knowing that Arcega-Whiteside is breathing down his neck. As of right now, it's all plain sailing. As of right now, everyone's in that kitchen making a nice cake. But someone's let their little kid into that kitchen, and the kid is going to pour a lot of sugar into the cake. And it's going to get a bit too sweet for a lot of people. And I just don't know if in 3-4 years' time, I don't think Alshon Jeffery will be here, and that's fair. But what if it's sooner? What if it's after next season? Are we really examining this year and saying, hey, is this not a shot at Alshon Jeffery? If I'm Alshon Jeffery, I'm pissed off. I'm very pissed off. Because since entering Philadelphia and playing with a torn rotator cuff and helping win a Super Bowl, I've done nothing but play my ass off. I averaged 9.2 yards per target in 2018. That was the most I had since 2013. I put up 13 yards per reception, at least, in both years. 15 touchdowns speak for themselves. A legitimate deep threat, a legitimate red zone threat. The guy makes plays. He's a top, not top, maybe like a top 10 receiver, certainly, or top 15. So he does all this. He gets paid the money. And now out of nowhere, after being understandably a bit annoyed that Zach has become the star of the show and it wasn't Alshon Jeffery, they now draft a receiver who is built in the exact same frame, does the exact same things well that Alshon Jeffery does. And you're not going to look at that move and think, I'm going to be replaced here. That guy's got a motorbike. That guy's younger, that guy's cheaper, he's got a higher upside than me, and he's not costing them $14 million. Is it that far-fetched to imagine that maybe, just maybe, even this offseason, if a big receiver goes down, Jeffrey doesn't get traded? If after next season, this may be premature, this may be overthinking, I don't know, but I think it is definitely something worth considering that Jeffrey won't reach the end of his contract. And Arcega-Whiteside, if he develops as many hope he will be good enough to take over a starting role before Jeffrey reaches the end of that contract. But I want to know what you think. I'm going to have an article on this out a little bit later on during next week, just diving into it a bit deeper. Is there pressure building on Alshon Jeffery to put up the best year he ever has, to prove that, do you know what, have Arcega-Whiteside, stick him in the slot, I don't care, but he is not taking my house. This is where I play, this is my role, this is where I dominate. If you move Arcega-Whiteside inside, you can have Jeffery, Arcega-Whiteside, Goddard and Ertz on the field at the same time. That's euphoric. But if they view him as a wide receiver one, things may get messy. But I want to know again what you think. If you're on YouTube, let me know down in the comments. If not, don't panic. Give me a tweet at Liam Jenkins PSN. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, for taking time out of your busy days to listen to what I have to say. I can't ever put into words how much that does mean to me and how much I appreciate it all. So before we go, your chance to win a t-shirt, Eagles Blockbusters, get your pause button ready, get ready to write them down. If you can't do that and you're on the way home, the time code is 35 minutes 7, well it's not because I just realised I've got to edit something later, so about 36 minutes in. Question 1, this Detroit Pistons player had to formally bow to his new coach upon arrival. Question 2, Jack Bauer's son went on holiday to a French city. And question 3, oi, get out of my larder. If you think you know the questions, send them to me, phillysportsnetwork@gmail.com, at Liam Jenkins PSN. From myself, Liam Jenkins, I'll see you next time. Have a great weekend.